Hey, welcome to another episode of Fish Innovation. This is an exciting week this week because we have someone in the field that is called an innovation strategist. You're probably thinking, oh, I've never come across. What is an innovation strategist? Well, here's the good news. You get to learn about all of it on today's episode. And it's really important because, as I mentioned before in other episodes, there's a lot of things that you need as tools to help you, whether it's growing your business, acquiring customers, you name it. And I've had other people on that are even supporting to innovation to help you get there. Well, this week we have someone who's going to be able to really open up your eyes, see how to think about things when it comes to your own business and using innovation to drive and be successful. With that, I want to bring to the show Melissa. How you doing?
Hey, Van, thanks for having me. I'm doing great.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. I know you're on the West Coast. Is it sunshine today or
It is. Yeah, it's sunny and warm and beautiful here today.
nice? That's good to hear because I know there's been a lot of maybe not recently, but fires and I know across the country a lot of things going on. So it's
Yeah,
good that you
California is
guys.
a pretty crazy place to live.
Yes, I know I used to live in California, so I'm very aware, but not for a long time. I've been there. So just like everybody on the show, we always ask, what is it you're doing and how did you get there? What's your story? What's your journey? Talk to us.
Yeah, well, I like to equate my journey as if you think of a pinball machine and those little balls in the pinball machine, I'm kind of like one of those little balls in the pinball machine because my journey has not been a straight one. I do not have a corporate background. I'm not one of those people who, worked in corporate and then left corporate and started their consultancy. That is not my journey. I actually trained as a dancer at Juilliard. I had a 15-year career in business as a professional artist and calligrapher, and I have toured and performed as a jazz singer-songwriter. And I also, during that time, I got a bachelor's degree at UC Berkeley and a master's degree in cultural studies at the University of Birmingham in England, and thought I was going to go on and become an academic, and ended up falling backwards into this art career. And during that time as an artist, which I ended up becoming a professional artist because I loved making things and I loved making art, I got very burned out making art for clients, for other people, and had to kind of figure out how to get back to making art for the joy of it, and figured out that the route to doing that was play, and needed to get back to being like a little kid, having the mind space of a little kid again. But I'd forgotten how to play after, so many years of making art for other people. And so I developed a set of basically rules, a handful of little like rules for myself, because I'm nothing if not a rule follower. I was always good at school. And those little handful of rules helped me get into that mind space of being a little kid and being able to play and get back to making art for the joy of it. And over the next few years, those handful of rules expanded into 10. I now call them guideposts because most creatives are not weird like me and they don't like rules. And those 10 guideposts form now the backbone of what became my book, The Creative Sandbox Way. And I ended up falling backwards into a second business as a creativity instigator, creativity coach, helping other people get creatively unstuck and reconnected to their innate creativity. And so I did that for a number of years, and I had a blog and a podcast and ran creativity courses and group coaching, and it was basically all online, except for once a year, I ran a creativity retreat in person. And over the years of running this retreat, every morning after breakfast, I would lead people through what I called a creative catalyzing session, which was basically improv games, because in addition, I'm an improv performer, getting up
Nice.
on stage and getting suggestions from the audience and creating scenes and stories.
Yeah.
And so I would bring these games into these retreats, and basically the idea was to get people laughing and moving and out of their heads and into their bodies, because in our heads, that's where these gremlins live, the voices of self-doubt and self-criticism that say things like, what are you doing? Who do you think you are? You shouldn't be making art. That's a waste of time, or you suck, or, all those nasty negative self-talk voices live in our heads. And when we can get out of our heads and into our bodies, then we can send those gremlins off to get a pedicure while we get down to the business of doing our creative thing. So, over the years of leading people through these creative catalyzing sessions, these improv games, I realized, this is exactly the same thing that I would be doing if I were leading, say, a group of engineering managers or, tech leaders or any other, a corporate team or a team from, government or a team from an organizational group. I would be doing the same thing. I would just be debriefing it differently. So why don't I pivot and do that? Because actually being in a room with people is my genius zone. And also, by the way, they also have more resources to pay me than starving artists. So I made the decision to make that pivot in 2017. But here's the thing, Ben, making that pivot was kind of like being at the bottom of Mount Everest, because I didn't come from corporate. I didn't have a corporate network. And I also had no idea how to sell into a big organization, how to sell B2B. All of my experience was B2C, which I had learned how to do, but I didn't know how to do, B2B sales. So it was starting from scratch, completely redefining myself. And it's been a journey since then, but that's the journey that I have been on. And I was starting to get some traction and had a few gigs and done some work for some clients, including some big names like Uber. And then a little thing called a global pandemic happened. And I had to reinvent myself again. And I did a lot of work in helping organizations lead better virtual events, virtual meetings. And then as the pandemic, sort of wrapped up, then I had to, kind of reinvent myself from there. But during the pandemic, I did a lot of work for Facebook, for Meta, on uh, developing virtual programs. And actually, that ended up being an advantage at the time, because if I had been brought in, first of all, I probably wouldn't have gotten a foot in the door. But because I had so much experience designing really good virtual experiences, I was brought in to run, well, basically a virtual retreat for one particular research team that needed help with their communication. They needed help learning how to communicate for influence, basically. So I designed this program for them. And had it been in person, they would have said, we have time for you to come in for one, half day or whatever it might have been. But because it was virtual, a half day virtual experience is very painful. Nobody wants to sit on a Zoom call for a half day. So
Yes.
I was able to design it as multiple sessions, which is actually much more effective for learning.
Yeah.
Having shorter sessions and more of them spaced out over time is much more effective for learning. But, leaders don't want to do that because they don't want to take time away from people's desks. But because we had to do it virtually, I was able to make that happen. And it was so effective that that manager told all of her manager friends. And for a number of years there, I was passed around Facebook. And so that became a flagship program for me. And I'm still delivering that program and sort of iterations of that program, my Communicating for Influence program. And what I do now is basically around the areas of what I call the 3 Cs: connection, communication, and creativity. And at the intersection of those 3 Cs is where innovation lies. And this is where the innovation strategist label comes from. Innovation lies at the intersection of those 3 Cs. If any one of those 3 Cs is broken in your organization, innovation is not happening. You have to have connection between your people. They have to be able to connect effectively. And the reality is, you can't bring me in and not have connection baked in. It's baked into everything I do. If your people are having amazing insights, but they're not able to communicate them effectively, then they're not going to be transmitted throughout your organization.
Yeah.
So that's the Communicating for Influence piece, where I help people learn how to, for example, empathize with their audience, whoever it is that they're speaking to, whether it's one person, a cross-functional teammate, or, hundreds of people and they're standing on a stage. You have to be able to understand the context of your audience, get into their head, find a common point of connection and speak to that. You also have to be able to listen and understand and not just a lot of these researchers are highly trained academics with a lot of expertise, and they're used to, from academia, just arguing their point and digging in their heels, as opposed to listening, trying to understand, and building a relationship with the people that they want to influence. And we all know that if you want to influence somebody, or we can all think about experiences where you want to influence somebody, or somebody wants to influence you, and the way they go about it is to just like argue their point at you. They're not going to influence you very effectively. But
Well,
if
let's do
they,
this or something.
yeah, but if they appeal to, if you feel heard, and if you hear a story and you feel like your point of view is understood, then actually, and you feel like a relationship is being built, then you're more likely to be influenced by that person. So those are the kinds of things that I help them build muscles around. And I do it through play, actually, through tools from the world of improv and theater. So that's a communication piece. And then the creativity piece is I work with a lot of analytical folks and helping them, helping the left, sort of so-called metaphorical left brain folks tap into their right brain and understand that they're more creative than they think they are. And I also work with the right brain folks, the so-called creatives
Yeah.
who are labeled as creatives, who they tend to get as stuck in perfectionism and the comparison trap as the left brain folks do. And then they get, stuck in perfectionist paralysis, continually polishing work instead of generating, more new work and taking risks and things like that. Helping teams and organizations really establish psychological safety so that people actually take risks, which they're not going to do if the psychological safety isn't there. So those are the kinds of things that I help organizations with now.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, when everything you just talked about is phenomenal because I think people are probably trying sitting there right now thinking, oh, it's a bunch of people wearing suits doing improv because I've been to an improv show, but it's not that, right? It's definitely there. Like you're absolutely right when it comes to even just thinking about the business itself, even if you're data driven, it really is important to tap into that creative side or at least open that up because there is like this communication in your brain scientifically that does I forget the name of the study, but they were able to show that if you're able to have that open piece, your reasoning and how you think about data will actually become a whole lot your analysis will be a whole lot better.
Yeah.
And so a long time ago I used to do this when I was in banking because people were very like rigid and focused on, the financial data and how we do it. So I'd call it like, innovation Fridays. We wouldn't do improv, but we would do uh, games to get the creative juices flowing. So I'd have them write down, all right, we're going to do a list of objects. Okay. I just want you to list out objects. The first object that comes into your head, just list it out. Right. And then on the right side, I want you to list out world problems. Okay. Pain points, things, just list it out. You're like, where are we going with this? Like, you'll see. Okay. Then the creative side came, which is, all right, now I want you to pick a number and then pick a letter because I had them letter the ones on the right and number the ones on the left. I said, okay, the first number and letter that comes to your mind, that's a combination. I want you to take that and I want you to come up with how whatever that object is going to solve the problem of whatever that is.
I love
And
that.
so it allowed them to, it was hard, right? So it's not like a Mad Lib, but it's like you're combining two
Yeah.
things that have almost no relationship, you would think from the start, because that's not how we think. But now you're like, oh, how is a backpack going to solve, my foot pain or whatever, right?
Yes.
And they had to
Yes.
it doesn't have to be a whole full product launch, but in a while in
it's
the
developing flexibility of our minds. And that is what I call a forced justification exercise. And those are so great for helping us to just develop this ability to be spontaneous, to be flexible in our thinking. And the more we do that kind of game, basically that kind of activity, the better we get at it. And what's so important for creativity for folks who are listening is to practice these kinds of things because we want to be facile. If you want your team, yourself to be able to be creative and innovative and to be competitive in the marketplace, we have to constantly be able to connect dots in ways that you know, other people are not. And we want our teams, we want to be able to be connecting dots with each other. And so that kind of exercise is excellent. And I use those types of activities, in the work that I do with the teams that I work with as well.
yeah, I mean, you have to think outside the box, like you said, the forced, because you're saying, what does a backpack have to do with foot pain? And if you were highly analytical, you're thinking about a foot wearing a backpack. Now,
Right.
that's okay because they might say, oh yeah, what if we invented this mini backpack that has wheels on the bottom, and then, there's a cushion. And then other people are like, well, the backpack has straps and loops and a pouch. Oh, what if we use the pouch side of the backpack to become like a foot protector? Because why are they getting the pain? Like, it was just like two different ways to approach the same problem with non-traditional, like, why is a backpack going to help a foot pain, right? So but it was neat because then it works. Because 'cause I'm telling you, the next hour, they would go and do their regular work, and they were
Yeah.
like, "Oh my gosh, I've been staring at this problem for 2 weeks, and then all of a sudden I got a solution." And I'm like, "I wonder why." Yeah, so I think it's those kinds of things are really powerful, and the things that you're doing to help people, just come out of their own shell and out of their own thinking style and see how they could, if once you think differently, that's where like that innovation comes. And it's always really neat. So the improv, I mean, I think that's really fun to do. I think, I don't know. I don't want to speak for all product manager folks, but I would think they all did some sort of improv growing up, or they like theater or what, because that's where you had to kind of think, right. And do things.
Well,
What are,
I have to be really judicious in the use of improv in my marketing and when I talk about it because I do not lead with improv. I
yeah.
don't lead with improv in my marketing or anything because people have interesting associations with it. They tend to be really anxious and scared
Yeah.
and they think improv equals stand-up comedy or all
No.
sorts of things
Yeah,
that it's not.
exactly,
And
yeah.
they assume that I'm going to put them up on a stage and put a spotlight on them and put a microphone in their hand, which is
Yeah,
not at all what we do. What I do is have them either all together in a group or in pairs or in small groups. I lead them through an activity
yeah,
that may feel like we're playing a game. It may feel like it has nothing to do with communication or leadership or whatever the topic of our program is. Sometimes it does, but often it doesn't feel like it has anything to do with it. I'll lead them through the activity. It may take 2 minutes. I don't know, it varies. And then this is my fun method. The F stands for find the flow. That's leading them through this activity. They're often laughing during the activity. It's typically quite fun. Sometimes it's challenging. Then we come back together for a debrief. And this is the U that stands for unlock the meaning. And this is where they start to connect the dots and as to what this activity that I just led them through, what this has to do with their day-to-day work life, with communication, with leadership, whatever it is. And the light bulbs start going off over people's heads and they have these aha moments. So that's the U. And then the N stands for name the change or now what? So, and that's what does this have to do with, what you're going to do next? How are you going to apply this? How is this going to actually change what you're going to do as a result of what just happened? And it's hugely effective because if I were to go into a company, a team, share with them, you know, when you're talking with an audience, whether it's one person or a big room, it's really important to think about where they're coming from and what their context is. And it's really important to use an analogy when you talk to them so that
Yeah.
they understand. If I were to go in and and share that with them, you know what would happen? It would go in one ear and out the other. So instead, I come in and I lead them through an activity. So one, can I share with you an
Yeah.
activity? Okay, so this is one of my favorites to go to that I use. I didn't make it up. It's well used in the applied improv community. I call it the time traveler. So person A, I divide people up in pairs. Person A is from present time, everything's normal for them. Person B is a time traveler from 500 years ago. So it's 1525. They have just suddenly appeared in the 21st century. Person A has a cell phone that has we imagine that has just gone off.
Yeah.
Now, before I send them off into their pairs, we have a little chat about what would be different for this time traveler in 1525. How is life different for them? So Ben, let me ask you, like what would be different for somebody living in 1525? How is life different for them?
So I don't think they had run facilities, right? So they're using
Yeah,
outhouses and or
absolutely.
they're dumping it into the street.
Totally.
Definitely no healthcare. I
Yeah.
wouldn't say no, but there was nothing like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no modern medicine. Yep, yep.
Yeah. Clearly no technology. I mean, no light.
Yeah,
I mean, they're still using candles. I mean,
yeah, no
animals.
electricity.
Yeah, animals were probably a big part of how they survived. They're also probably weren't living past the age of 25, 30. So you're gonna have
Probably
young.
true.
So there's a lot more, probably I would say, a higher concentration of younger undeveloped minds that are
Probably true.
thrown into more leadership positions and not, so even though they're lacking experience, but scientifically they don't have the prefrontal cortex developed yet until 25
Good
years of
point.
age, which means they're going to be making more, I wouldn't call it rash decision making, but they're not going to have that ability to have the thought or have a rational conversation with themselves. They're just going to take the risk and hope that it pays off.
Good point. Good point. Yeah,
Yeah.
so lots of differences, that you just mentioned. So after we've sort of bubbled up a bunch of differences for this person who is time traveled from 1525, then I send them off into their pairs. But first I remind them, hey, okay, so person from the present time, your job is to explain what your cell phone is to your time traveling partner. You have 2 minutes to do so. But remember, there is a high likelihood that your time traveling partner is going to think that you're a witch. I mean,
Yeah.
think about it.
Oh yeah. There's
Because
no communication was maybe done by bird. I don't think there
right,
would. I mean, you wouldn't have known who's in your village unless you actually walked there. And then talking is, I mean, forget texting altogether, but
yeah,
just the phone in general, right?
yeah, they didn't have telecommunications, they didn't have electricity. I mean, come on. So, in addition to explaining what this device is, you are going to have to convince them that you're not a witch, and you have 2 minutes. Go. So they go. Now, this is an impossible task. But this is their assignment. So off they go. They have 2 minutes. It's totally impossible. There's a lot of laughter. We come back together, whether we're on Zoom or in person, we come back together and I poll the room. How many witches are in the room? Invariably, half the room raises their hand because the time travelers are all like, you are a witch. However, then, and of course, there's a lot of laughter, but then I poll the time travelers. Did any of you have a partner who said something that was at all effective? And the time traveler said, somebody says invariably, yeah, yeah, my partner said something, whatever it was. And of course, it's always some kind of analogy. So all of the people in the room are like, okay, that makes sense. So then I have them switch roles. I give them a new scenario. It's not a cell phone this time, it's something else. They go off again. And now the present time people have a leg up because now they're thinking, okay, I have to find common ground with my partner. I have to figure out an analogy that's going to make sense to them in their context, then they do it again. We come back together and we debrief around what worked. And they start to see that what worked for this person didn't work for that person. And it's like starting to make all these light bulbs go off over their heads. And what happens, Ben, is that then they go off and live their lives over the next week and come back and report back at the next workshop and share, I had a conversation with my cross functional teammate. I was getting really frustrated because they weren't understanding. And then I realized, oh my God, they're the time traveler. I'm the witch. I need to change what I'm saying. They're not stupid. They're not being difficult. It's on me, which is a huge, huge growth for these folks, for
Yeah.
all of us, right? And there's a very small, small chance that any of us is going to encounter a time traveler in our day to day activities, right? But it's 100% chance that we're going to encounter somebody who has a different context from our own. And by leading people through this improv activity, where it's such an extreme, crazy example that gets them laughing, that gets them playing, they have this experience that is so sticky, it's so memorable that it lives on with them and it changes their behavior going forward.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I like your, I'm gonna say 110%, if that was possible, because like you said, if you just said, if you can make an analogy to whatever you're talking about, that will help communicate. They're gonna go, huh? And it's gonna go in one area, not the other. But forcing them to go through that and being on the other end, I mean, I'm sure they've been on the other end of miscommunication and they just sort of made their own assumptions. And that's how, again, things become broken, or the game of telephone, right? Or they're on the other end, which is how to, the other person doesn't speak up. And they're like, okay,
Right.
they understood it. And then they go off. You're like, no, this is not what I meant. Well, that's on you. You should have figured out. You should have confirmed with them before you left. But the point is, yeah, them feeling that and going, that gives an opportunity. Be kind of funny if people were just sitting there calling people witches. They're talking about work and they're like, "Witch." You're like, oh, I know what that means. That means I need to be a little bit clearer in my communication. Yes, and that, I think that's great, because now, a lot of people who don't usually speak up, especially if there's a hierarchy or things like that, but if everybody was in on it, then you can just feel comfortable in saying, "Oh, you're a witch," and then it doesn't come across as hurtful or harmful or misaligned. It's, hey, okay, they're telling me I'm not communicating well. I should probably
Well,
should.
and the teams that I've worked with at Facebook have started using that internally as their language, like, "Oh my God, I'm being a witch. Oh, you're being a witch." So
Yeah,
I love that you caught on to that.
as long as they're not being burned at the stake, we're okay. As long as they're following through with that. But you're 100% right. I mean, let's kind of shift to AI. I think you talk about this. I mean, this is a good transition, because think about it. You're, instead of a time traveler from 500 years ago, you've got, what is it, like 85% of the universe not familiar with AI, and only
Right.
15% who are. Obviously, working in an all AI company, everyone knows, but trying to communicate that, honestly, the only real effective way to do it is analogies. And so, like,
Yeah.
one example, I think people have this misconception that AI is going to replace me and take my job.
Right.
Well, yes, if you work on the manufacturing line at Ford Motor Company and you're, piecing together something, yeah, your job will probably be taken. But if you're someone who's at Facebook, no, AI is not going to take your job. The pieces that AI is going to help you do your job better. There's this misconception. It's like, well, why is that? It's like, well, here's the analogy. Okay, if you're gonna, I think everybody at some point in time, if you owned a house or you graduated college, you probably had to use a hammer, and you probably had to hammer a nail. Just putting it out there, the majority of people out there. So I always refer to AI is the type of hammer, the type of tool you would use. I always say, hey, when you have a nail, your hand to sit there and you know pound it down? Yeah, it's possible. And it's probably gonna take you a really long time, and it's gonna be very painful. And you might say, "Oh, okay, maybe I'll tape it up and I'll just sit there and bang it, and then, I won't get hurt as much," but again, it's gonna take a while. And then comes along a hammer and someone says, "How about I give you a hammer?" And you go, "Boop. Oh, that was quick." Well, AI, Gen AI is essentially the hammer, right? Like your job of what you're doing today is a lot of manual work, which you're using your hand to sit there and pound in
Yeah,
a nail, and AI
yeah.
is now great. So, now if you've never seen a hammer before, you might go, "How do I use this?" "Oh, well, this is
Right, right.
this well, that but we're all we're, ingenuitous, right? We're going, "Okay, there's a heavy end, that's a lighter end. Oh, look, oh, yes, gravity. Okay, boom." And then now we know how a hammer works, right?
Yeah, and
Uh,
AI is a little bit more complicated than that.
exact but you can see, like, now, for people who are concerned about AI taking their job, you're like, "Oh, no, you're right. I have to be the wielder of the hammer to
Yep,
do it." And
yep.
then, I get a little more complex and I say, "Okay, well, we think about using different LLMs for different tasks." Okay, so
Yeah,
you might have a mallet, right?
right.
Now, would you use a mallet on a nail? Probably not. But you're gonna use a mallet maybe if you're doing some art and you need to chisel something, right? Or how about a sledgehammer? Okay, like, are you gonna use a sledgehammer on a nail? No. But if you had a huge wall that you needed to tear down that required that kind of tool, you would. So it's the same kind of concept with AI is
I
finding
like this analogy. This is a very good analogy.
yes, you have to find so you have to be the person who figures out the right tool to use. And
Yep.
again, you would have only known either with Sledgehammer, you would have seen a DIY show, or you would have, asked somebody at Lowe's, what is a hand sledgehammer used for? Same kind of concept. Like if I need to use a specific model or a specific AI technique, right? Do I want to use machine learning? Do I want to use deep learning? Right? That, yes, you're not going to know what those words are until you actually look it up and go, okay, machine learning is it's an algorithm that helps me understand labeled data. So like, and a great example is like, linear regression. I can see how things correlate and then, predict if I know
Mm.
X, I'll be able to, I know what Y will be. Right. And so that's machine learning in a really simple form. But now you're like, oh, I don't need to sit here and read through all this data. I can go and do linear regression, actually find out. Boom. But am I gonna do linear regression on writing a creative story? No, I'm not. Same kind of concept. So, yeah, it's just an interesting way, I think, talking about future technology, and that comes to product speak. And I sorry, I just love this, and I'm like, I love that I'm getting this for free and everybody else is because, they're you've got like every product manager should be calling you up and having you come to their company because I'm sure if you surveyed a bunch of product managers, they're having trouble communicating, to leadership, like what is the
Mm.
vision? Okay. And there's a lot of data. There's a lot of different techniques and a lot of ways to do it. And I'm not saying people normally struggle in this case, but it is hard because somebody who's making decisions and trying to, influence the entire organization, you're just one piece of that puzzle. And so it's really hard to communicate how great this product would be. So you're essentially you're the witch talking to the time traveler who is, right in this sense, so a time traveler who's never seen this product before,
Yeah.
who doesn't understand how it's going to help them, AKA their business. And so you've got to be able to be effective in your communication. So how are you going to do that? Right. And again, they should be looking to call you up to come and get them there. Like how do they think about it? What is the structure? What is the framework they should be using? How do you talk with someone who doesn't always make decisions quickly? Right. Like
Yeah.
what are the things you should be talking about? I mean, when you were talking about improv, I was like, you have to be quick on your feet.
Yep.
Like
That's one of the things improv is so good about
yeah,
in
you
helping
can't
people develop.
exactly. You go silent, it's like, okay, right? But you gotta think, and so maybe some of the leaders who don't have that quick decision-making ability, it's beneficial for them to do this improv work to have to make a decision, right? Like, and then they find out, "Hey, it's not so hard."
Well, as somebody told me a long time ago, you do anything enough and it becomes normal.
Yeah.
And that's the thing with improv. Like if people are scared, the idea of improv is scary. First of all, what I do with the teams that I work with is very similar to that time traveler activity that I shared with you, and the activities are all different, so they're not all like the time traveler one. They're so varied, but I'm not throwing people up on stage and saying, "Go! I'm gonna shine a spotlight on you, and we're gonna pull you off with a hook." I'm not doing
Yeah.
anything like
No, no,
that.
of course not. No.
But doing improv is such an incredible opportunity. And really, I found of all the various different things that I've done in my life, improv is one of the most transformative and life changing and life like growth building. If you want to do something that is going to stretch your leadership muscles, stretch your all the things that you need to do to improve in, professional development, life skills, you name it, improv is really it. I have a colleague who refers to it as the gym for life. It's like we go to the gym for, muscles and strength training and all of that. We go to improv as the gym for life.
Yeah, your brain. I mean, it's a mental being able to do that, and you're right, like you said, once you learn it and apply it each day, it just becomes natural, and I think that's very, very critical. So, I like, all the things you're doing now, and people are really, like, starting to open their eyes and practice this, and it's good to hear that even large corporations like Facebook are even coming being able to think differently, and then that will help with folks that are using the platform, like, how to improve that, not just rely on the data, but more of intuition and being able to effectively communicate that and be creative. How do you see, like a few years from now? You mentioned all these different transitions, like from 2017 to COVID to, you've had to kind of reinvent. Like, where do you see it doesn't, maybe it's not the next year, but maybe like in the next 5 years, right? Like, where do you see kind of the work that you're doing on how being transformative, like what you're going to be using or what you're going to be doing to make an even bigger impact?
What I'm going to be doing in the next few years.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. I see in the next few years really helping more organizations build cultures of resilient innovation. And what I mean by that is do spending more and more of my time moving beyond one-off workshops to more of the work that I'm already doing, but more of the long-term programs where I can help teams really embed the habits and mindsets that lead to sustainable creativity and courageous communication and continuous learning. And I'm also, I am imagining myself really growing the speaking side of my business. I love being on stage and sharing impactful messages. And I'd love to be on more stages, especially in front of analytical, tech savvy audiences who don't necessarily see themselves as creative yet. I'm so passionate about this because helping those left brain types unlock their right brain brilliance, that's my superpower. And I'm just so passionate about getting those people connected to their creative sides. And then, of course, I'm continuing to evolve my frameworks, my Create the Impossible framework, the Creative Sandbox way, communicating for influence to help the rapidly changing needs of today's workplace 2 to 5 years from now.
Well, I mean, I love that you say that, like how you're thinking about more and more how to get the messaging across and how to integrate that. And I was just kind of randomly thinking while you were saying that it'd be interesting if somebody could put you in a software, right? Like, well, because you laugh, but I'm kind of being serious
Yeah,
because
I know you are.
like when we think about today, like a lot of teams are on agile, right? And we usually have like an agile coach or a scrum coach, which is essentially a project manager, but it's a project manager that should have your skill set, right? So the person who's be able to, because they're supposed to be, I don't want to call them a mediator, but they're supposed to be the ones who are working on the timelines and helping with effective communication.
Mhm.
But again, it's a lot of people who are in project management move on over to this field. So you're coming from someone who's again still left brain, very rigid in structure and how things going to how am I supposed to create creativity, between folks and communication. And so there's not a lot of software out there that is incorporating this kind of work, right? Like we've got Jira, Asana, all these different things that are just literally the same format I just told you, but now
Yeah.
digitally. And then
Yeah.
and it's supposed to improve communication, but it doesn't because all you're doing is just documenting your communication.
Right.
So if you don't get that right, so you could almost be sort of like and this is just making up stuff. Maybe someone who's listening will build it, for you, but it would be, um, it's an alert, sort of like an alert system, like this was not effectively communicated, right?
Yeah.
So you're the witch, this is witchified, right? You need to go back and become, make it more clear, like this hitting a witch spot. I'm oversimplifying, of course, but it's a way for someone to say, "You know what? You're right. I have to go back and I have to maximize the communication so it's a little clearer on the vision." I know many organizations struggle with this.
Oh my god, yeah, it's rampant.
I mean, I personally found success and this is my science background, and I learned it when I was in grad school for chemistry, I remember, very clear from, like, other postdocs and other professors who were like, "When you're going to present and when you're putting together, right, your ideas and things, it's not gonna help unless everybody is on the same page." And
Yep.
so their thing was you have a background slide, and a background slide acts as a way to get everybody onto the same
Everybody.
page. And even in technology and science papers, there's always an introduction. And the introduction serves as the background to help you. They actually present the problem, right? What's happening? Same thing.
Yeah.
Most communication is it's important to present the problem, get
Yeah.
everybody aware, and then how you've defined the problem. And so when you're working with these teams, such a lot of the engineering, product development, you're right, they have a great left brain skill set to get what you need done. But if they don't have the power behind them to understand the why behind it, which is the background and get everyone on the same page, you don't get as much added value out of them.
Yeah.
And I've seen this firsthand that when a very complex topic, I call it my 101 class, and we do like whatever it is, 101 for the first week or 2 weeks of the sprint, which is usually a sprint. We just spend each day going through these steps. Now, I think it's important to bring in improv in there, because you're setting up the team, you're setting up the scrum. That would be a great time to have you come in or your software,
Mhm.
come in and do this because you're at that moment, you're defining the team values, the structure of the team, you're creating the team name. That's the one where you do that later once they're more creative because doesn't always come out great, but once they are creative, they come up with a great name and they bond on the name and everything. But by having that background on like what it is and why, they go way beyond. Their creativity just opens up. It's like, yep, I know. And then they know more than a lot of other people at the company about that topic because they got to spend the time learning it in the 101 class. And I do it now with consulting, as I come in as a product advisor, something I make sure like you got to have a one-on-one class, right? Something
I
to
love
get
it.
everybody on the same page. But yeah, you're absolutely, I mean, everything you said, I think it's the communication, the creativity, it's all related. Um, is there, I know we have a little bit of time, but what is something out there, people who are, whether it's startups, or, even people who are in a corporate role, like what are some things they could be doing or asking questions of themselves, to help even improve their situation right now if they don't have someone like you that's come to see them?
Let's see. Well, one of the things that I see a lot of, just in general, communication in general, is people tend to think that communication is about delivering facts. But really, the best communicators don't just deliver facts, they create meaning. They speak to the head and the heart. So that's why storytelling is also so important. And also just because human beings are wired for story. So that's something I know, I imagine that your audience is probably familiar with that concept, but I still see it a lot. Like I've gone to the local makerspace where they do people come in and pitch their products,
Yeah.
and there's it's a lot of fact delivery. Which is just not very effective. You have to speak to the heart. You have to tell a story. So that's another thing. And then people also assume that communication is mostly about what we say, but the real magic happens when we focus on how it lands, which is all about empathy and listening and talking about improv, adapting in real time. And one of my favorite workshop moments is when a brilliant technical person realizes, "Ah, if my audience doesn't understand me, it's not their fault. It's an opportunity for me to reframe," which takes us back to the time traveler activity.
Yeah, I mean, couldn't even be clear. I think you're absolutely right. I think a lot of people miss that, right? We talked about that earlier. People who just kind of assume and go do it, and or they think that the person knows. And even just asking at the end, saying, "I know I might have said a lot," or is there, was I clear in what I did? If not, tell me now, and I'll be more than happy to rephrase it. And I think that's helpful as well, right? To get people, because
Yeah.
sometimes it is hard to read, especially. I mean, hopefully, if you're doing virtual, you can read body language, but some people put up a good front, so it's better just to ask what, they're saying.
Definitely. Yeah.
There's a cool, there's a psychologist, I forget her name, so I apologize, I don't know, I always forget the names, but the story is she studies this, which is, like, why we're the humans are the worst at reading minds, right? We don't know, and she talks about herself as a simple story was she has something called, like, RBF, resting B face.
Resting bitch face.
Yeah, I don't know if we're,
Which
people.
only women are accused of having, which is so sexist.
Yeah, I know, I don't yeah, I guess I'm trying to describe, like, so she had this, but when she's in, like, thinking mode, that's the face that exudes from her. So there was a story of her in an elevator with a student that was in her class at the time that she was teaching, and the the student must have said hello, and she was lost in her own thought, and so she came across very angry and, "Whoa," and so I guess the girl came, like, a year later and came into her office, and the professor was like, "Why did you choose to go here?" She's, "Well, actually, I was gonna come choose to work for you, but then when I was in the elevator,
Oh,
I
yeah.
thought you hated me," right? She's like, "Wait, did I have my coffee, and was it around, like, between 9 and 10 AM?" She's like, "Yeah, I think so." She goes, "Yeah, so just to let you know, when it's 9 between 9 and 10 is when I go get my coffee, and that is when I have my, like, thinking session, so I am lost in my own self, and sadly, my face looks like I wanna kill everybody." But, like, that was her point, like, so she studies this, so the girl was like, "Oh, maybe I shouldn't have written that review about you," like, it was, because she was in the class, and so it was so her point to everybody was like, "Just ask," right? Like, is that the girl's fault?
Don't make assumptions.
Yeah, yeah, like, of course, like, you see an angry professor, but you know her not to be that way, maybe say, "Is everything okay? You have is how's your
Yeah,
day
maybe
going?"
ask.
Yeah, and she would have been like, I would have snapped out of it if you did, but again, yeah, I mean, that is why it's important to if you know someone not to be that way, ask them, like, "What is it?" And she would've been like, "Oh, like, you look really mad." "Oh, I'm so sorry, like, I just look mad when I'm thinking." "Oh, what are you thinking about?" "Well, I'm thinking about this particular paper, this grant." "Oh, talk to me about it," right? And so, again, at the end of the day, just ask, right? Just
You
say something.
know? It's such great advice. I get that too. Like, I don't know what I have a very sort of facile face that is often expressing things that don't relate to how I feel.
Yes, yeah, 100%. We shouldn't make assumptions about people, like, that's just always ask at the end, like, "Hey, it looked like maybe you weren't focused on what I was saying." "No, I was there, that's how I think, I look to the side, and I just
Yeah.
listen. That's how I get." "Okay, got it,"
Yeah. My husband will often ask me, like, "Are you upset with me?" "No, I am not upset with you." Whatever it is that's going on with me that has nothing to do with, but he will have a feeling of concern that I'm upset with him because my face looks a certain way. It has nothing to do with him. It's just that's what my face looks like right then.
Yeah, well, that's I mean, that is a lot of things spouses deal with, right? I mean, we're not out here for spouse therapy, but the point is like, you're right, like, but we know our spouse more intimate, right? And but we also know our work colleagues. We spend more time with our work colleagues than we do our own family.
Right?
So, it is that, when you get to know someone for a while, like, you do start to pick up, but people still make a lot of assumptions. They just go, "Yeah, well, they've always looked angry. I just assume they were angry." Like, no, they're not angry, or ask them or find out, which is, interestingly enough, why I've been trying to implement AI a lot of places because especially over the phone, because the tonality of the call, like the voice AI agent, is meeting the needs of the person. So if you have someone
Mm,
really angry calling in, you can train a voice AI to sort of respond and react and bring down the tension. But humans are gonna hear someone comes in red, it's really easy. If you were yellow, they can get you to get red too.
yeah.
And that's the thing too, like, especially meetings at the end of the day, we've had to go everybody's doing these thought processes constantly throughout the day, and it becomes exhausting, and by the end of the day, you're worn out. So if you have a
Yeah.
5 o'clock meeting, better be an innovation session or talking about
Right.
something else, not, a work-related thing. Even though we think we could handle it, your emotions are not in line with where you'd wanna be when you talk to someone first thing in the morning. So
Yep.
something interesting for people to kind of think about in doing that. And then, or at least if you've got, your front end or experience or teams, replacing them with AI, you know, to do
Yeah,
that.
that's a really interesting point.
Yeah.
Yeah, because responding to somebody else's anger or whatever, that's really hard to do if you are not super grounded and rested and well fed and you have your barriers up so that you are not taking in their anger and that's if an AI doesn't have those issues.
No, no. AI is like, ooh, okay, this person's tone does not sound like it should. Okay, let me do this. And I was doing it also with writing before too, like reviews. It's really interesting. A lot of folks out there, right? Like a lot of small businesses who are service based, professional services, right? They rely a lot on reviews for their website. So these people are getting like scathing reviews, and then they would get angry, like, "How dare you insult my business? Like you're insulting me." AI, I was helping them by saying, let's put in an AI bot that's going or automation that's going to write back to these people, and we'd find that when you had angry reviews, the AI would be able to calm the person down, and then
Mm,
once they were calm, then you would insert a human to call and like
mm.
and make things right. Because in that moment when someone's seeing red, it's so hard to
Oh, yeah.
calm them down. And even if you're in hospitality or you're trained, like we're humans, right? So you
Yeah, and I'm thinking of, just like an example in my own life when I sent a very frustrated email to a business and got a really nasty response from the CEO of that business. And I thought, wow, you missed an opportunity.
yeah,
If you had responded in a different way, you could have had a brand ambassador for your business. And instead, not only have you lost my business, but you now have the opposite of a brand ambassador. And that business, by the way, is now out of business.
of course.
Not a big surprise. And then I'm thinking about how one of the ways that I use AI for communication myself, we were talking about this before we started the recording,
Yeah,
is I use it to help me with my email correspondence. Also, very specifically, when I'm trying to figure out how to respond in a way that is really, diplomatic or challenging. And I can say to my AI tool, these are all the things that I want to be able to communicate, but I don't know how to do that,
yeah,
how to word it, and I need help wording it. And then the AI will spit out something, and then I can look at it and, 95% of the time, I don't even have to change anything because it knows me so well now. Maybe I tweak a couple of words or something. And I have done this in scenarios that are really tricky and that things like here's an example, Ben. So I have some colleagues who carpool to events regularly. and three other women. A guy wanted to join us who we are all friendly with and we know quite well, but who's new to the group. And he wanted to carpool with us as well. And I'm such a people pleaser and I like the guy and we all like the guy. And first response was, of course you can carpool with us. But then one of the other participants to the two girls, three women said, I really like our girl time and it'll really change the dynamic if he joins us, but, up to you guys, and I was thinking about it more and I realized, she was right. And hadn't checked in with how I felt about it. I was just like, people pleaser is on alert. And so I thought about it. And the other third, person also said that she felt the same way. And so I turned to my AI tool and I said, here's the situation. Here's what I would like to say. I don't want to hurt this person's feelings. I want to let them know that I don't want to leave them in a lurch. Help me write a letter. And they did, well, at first they passed it by my two women friends and they were like, dude, if you're brave enough to send it, go for it.
Really? Brave enough?
And
What did the AI
yeah,
write?
because
Now I wanna know what you had said.
they were like, I mean, that's an amazing letter. I don't feel like I'd be brave enough to send it. But if you are, then, by all means do, but it's up to you. And so I sent it and I was a little worried about what would happen. And do you know what happened? He sent back the loveliest letter and he said, I completely understand. And I'm so glad you said something. And I have a friend that you know what, if somebody said to me, hey, can I join you and your friend, and he does a thing with a friend regularly. And if somebody wanted to join, he would feel like, I don't really want something to intrude on this because it's a special thing I do with my friend. He totally got it. And I could not have figured out how to write that letter on my own because I just needed an outside assistance to help me craft the languaging. So, I'm confessing that here publicly that I needed some help to make it happen. So that's one of the things that I have been really grateful for AI for. It has been, I don't know, an enabler of improved communication for me.
Well, think about, I mean, just the mental health piece, right? A lot of the anxiety and stress, you're able to say, you know what, I'm gonna put faith and trust in that whatever's written is gonna be right. It's worked for me before. Why not? And so, yes, it worked, and it just like it did. So you now know when you do that again, you're like, I have more trust that it's gonna work out. And if it doesn't, then it was meant to be that way. And so you end up not being stressed. The side with no, and I get it, right? Like it's a dynamic. He would have totally changed that. And then what would have been worse is he would have come in and a lot of the behavior or body language, or maybe people would have just been quiet. They wouldn't have been themselves. And then he would have been like, this is really awkward. Maybe I shouldn't be in here. Or then he starts having feelings of doubt, or like there's just this whole big mess. And instead, you were straight to the point, and then you had AI help deliver that message. And you probably, I'm sure you said, hey, can you write, take on the role of a therapist slash, someone who can communicate.
Yeah, I gave it some prompts.
Yeah. So, but then he gets this messaging and yeah, it hit him right on the spot. And then that created a huge amount of value for him too, because
Yeah,
he now knows like, wow, she's really open and honest on things. That's great. Right now, I can talk to her about things that maybe I wouldn't have talked to her about before, or like you strengthen your friendship with this person.
right.
And sounds weird, but AI is not the bad guy. If anything, AI, like you said, enabled or created that opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you prompt it correctly and do the right things, it will do it. And I think there's one last thing while we're talking about AI is you mentioned earlier about the storytelling, and I think it's so interesting. This is like my scientist coming through. And I'm like, that was one of the first things people did with ChatGPT was write me a story. Like that's what they did with it. Like they didn't use it as a conversationist. They didn't use it for a lot of what it was capable of. It was like, write me a creative story and here's what I want to see in the story. And I was talking to people even earlier this year who still haven't adopted AI or Gen AI. And they're like, oh yeah, Christmas. I went through and I made a cool Christmas story and read it out loud and everybody thought it was amazing. I used AI to do that. And another person who's a lawyer I know, they were like, "Oh, AI, what is that? You know, I don't know. Okay, maybe I'll look it up." And they had it like on their phone, and so they did storytelling as well. They were like, "Oh, I have to talk about this. How should I, do it?" So they asked AI to make a story around it, and then he told that story. I mean, needs prompting, but I mean, I heard the story, but yeah, I'm like, yeah, it's an AI wrote that. But it's really that's, like, what's unique is everybody who starts to enter into the world of AI is they start with storytelling, because like you
Oh,
said,
that's
it's a
so interesting.
natural human thing to do is, either learn through storytelling, just like you're doing we call it improv, but it is storytelling and the different techniques and skill sets required to refine that story, how to be a good storyteller, and that's what we do as humans. It's weird. Yeah, if I just
Yeah, one of the things that I use it a lot for, because uh, I write a story-based blog article that goes out to my newsletter, that goes on my blog, and then it goes out as a LinkedIn article the following week. And it's also I do it in a written form and also as a video script, whatever. And I like it to be story based because stories are more effective, right? And so I use ChatGPT to generate story prompts. So I use ChatGPT to help me with my editorial calendar. I can't remember if I think it might be Claude that actually helps me generate my editorial calendar. So I have all these themes, and then I plug the theme into ChatGPT to generate story prompts to help me write the story. And anyway, so that's part of the process that where I use Gen AI to help me generate my newsletter.
yeah, yeah, and I believe you should. I mean, these are things where we that gives us more time to do other things, right? To create more, to do more. And like you said at the beginning, you wanted to get back to art and creating art, but you had to, change your mind shift, and that was something you loved. And now that these things you don't have to stress about, like, how do I write an email, right? I don't have to like
Yeah,
spend 15 minutes writing what could be a 1 minute email, or the
exactly.
reverse, which is people who are way too busy who just go like 4 words and you're going, how do I interpret this thing? I don't know what they're talking about. I mean, I get the 1 word, but now you're analyzing what someone wrote. Like, hey, if we all just used to do email communications, we're all going to know what people want. So speaking of newsletters and what you send out, how do people get a hold of you? Like, what's the best way they can reach out and bring you to their organizations and talk with you more?
Yeah. Yeah, you can always find me at my website, which is my name, melissadinwiddie.com. You can find me on LinkedIn, also at my name, Melissa Dinwiddie. You can also find me on YouTube at my name, Melissa Dinwiddie.
Nice,
And you can find me on Instagram where I share my art. I make these spontaneous, improvisational, abstract artworks, also known as doodles, which I share on Instagram along with some other things. This one breaks the pattern. On Instagram, I am at a underscore creative underscore life. A
nice,
creative life with underscores. And also, for your podcast listeners, I have put together a free 1-page checklist that gives you a quick, practical way to unlock fresh ideas and spark innovation fast. Yes, I do have a QR code for you. And this is especially if you think you're not the creative type. It's called the Impact Innovation Checklist. And I have a short bit.ly link. It's bit.ly/FIP thank you, all one word. That's for Fish Innovation Podcast.
nice.
bit.ly/FIP thank you.
And we'll make sure to put all that information into the show, so the show notes, so people will be able to access all of that. And I think the QR code is really cool. They can, for the YouTube watchers, they'll be able to scan it really quickly. I don't know, think I can put it in the comments, but we'll see. I'll check it out. It's a URL, I would assume. And then, yeah, that's amazing. If they send you a message or a DM on any of these platforms, do you want them just to kind of say like, "Hey, I heard you on the show," or,
Yeah,
say,
that'd
"Hey,"
be great. That's always nice for me to know how you found me.
yeah,
Yeah.
and then kinda, that'd be great. Then they can start up chats and do all that. And I was gonna ask, the drawing you showed, was that an electronics diagram that you were showing, that first page?
No, this is these are just doodles. I take a pen and I just make a mark and I just start spontaneously going from there.
But if
So
you
these are
like, yeah,
completely
that page you're on, that's not that one, the one that you first just showed.
was it this one?
Yeah, so that at least me, I saw that really quickly as an electronics diagram. So you've got like your voltage, you've got your, and then you're showing how the things are connected there. Go
I
look
love
up
it.
electronic schema, and you'll be like, hey, this looks really close.
That's what I love about abstract art. People see different things. Everybody sees
Exactly.
something different.
And they should, now that they've seen this, so we know that they've watched the entire episode, they can go give their own interpretation on what
Yeah.
they can send that to you, and hopefully that will kick off some creativity as well, like giving
I love it.
and
Thumbs
communicating
up.
their thoughts, right? By the way, that like if you do certain things on certain platforms, it will do it digitally. So
Yeah.
you put
Right.
the thumbs
If you do a thumbs up.
yeah, we're on this platform doesn't do it, but yeah, if you're on like Zoom or even Google Meets, people you'll sit them and they'll go like some if you do this like whatever, there'll be an explosion on one of them. But don't look it up. It's like really interesting. It's like hidden what are they called Easter eggs or whatever, right? Like things you don't even know about, they don't tell you about, and then you got to find them, right?
I know you're just talking with somebody and suddenly like weird things start happening on your
Yeah.
window.
Like, what did you do? What did you do? I don't understand. And then, or if you're like pointing like this, it does show up as a thumb up. But then it's really awkward when you're having like, "Hey, sorry, your brother died," and then it just keeps.
Right, right. And you get a thumbs up.
What
We
are they?
get
What are they
balloons
doing? Are
going off
they
or
saying you
something.
hated my brother? I don't understand. That's when they communicate, right? They should say, "By the way, that thumbs up doesn't mean I hate your brother. It means it's like it's like this, and I'm going like this. Sorry if I, don't want. Oh, I wasn't even thinking that, but now that you say it, but
I know. It's like cross-cultural communication faux pas, right?
oh yeah, we can. I should send you the article on emojis. Yeah, that is a nut. So I think that it was a Harvard Business Review article or something. It was on. Take a look. I'll try and find it because you'll find this interesting from a communication standpoint. It was because I think Apple talked about it, like how they were going to release these emojis into the screen because um, different emojis mean different things to people. And then the other piece was I think this piece was Apple was talking about, how you can like do a thumbs up or a thumb. I think now you can do a thumbs down. You can do a question mark. I forget what they were called. There's some specific name for them, but they were actually designed to end a conversation, not like shut down, but that was supposed to be like the indicator to somebody that I'm done
Yeah,
talking to you.
like over and out.
Yeah, and that turns out that again, miscommunication. People don't so a lot of people thought it was just a reaction. They're like, "Oh, the thumbs up. I'm gonna keep talking." But the other person was like, "No, no, no, dude. I used the thumbs up instead of saying awesome or nice or cool. I just did a thumbs up, so I don't want to talk to you anymore." And so
I'm done.
yeah, so they like you gotta read the article, but it's like they struggled with whether they were gonna release this or not because they found this in user testing, and then they thought, well, should I do like a guide map or a step-by-step instruction manual on how to use these things so that people know, so that we don't interpret. And it's so interesting because it's a symbol, right? And it's essentially it's art and it's all interpretable. So how do we do that, right? In our written form, how do we
Wow.
do better? And they didn't have an answer, but I'm sure you would be able to come up with one right away. Like, how do you do that? Or, maybe it's something that you just set up when you first talk to someone. You actually lay the ground rules.
Yeah. I
By
mean,
the
you
way, I
have
want to let
to.
you know when I'm talking, this is how I do things. When I do these message enders, whatever they're called, I treat them as a message ender, not as a response.
Yeah.
So if you don't hear from me, that means that I had to run off, but I will come back. And I know some other people have said either they do that or what they do is when they do come back to the conversation, they'll say, "Hey, I just want to let you know, that's how I usually indicate to someone that I've got to go instead of just saying it. I'll respond to your last comment with a whatever emoji thing on the message. And so going forward, you'll know that. And so if that frustrated the person, thinking that it was supposed to be a reaction instead of a conversation ender, now you just let them know. And it was like really interesting. Like I mean, who would have know these things, right? But everybody thinks differently. So in your real,
Communication, man. Until we have the Vulcan mind meld, it's,
yeah, like I mean, yeah, all the emoji. You got to be careful. I mean, you really have to know your friends, and even then, when you know your friends, what is it? You just ask, right? You go, "Hey, I saw you
just ask.
weird emoji. Are you making fun of me?" No, that's my emoji, which means like excitement. Okay, cool. Now I know whenever I see this, it means excitement from you, right?
Yeah, it is the new motto. Just ask.
I'm gonna have an AI that just integrates with my text messaging platform, and whenever somebody starts a new text message with me, it'll just send a disclaimer that gives the rules how Ben talks.
There we go. Just ask. Oh, I think it's showing up as a
Yeah,
mirror image.
yeah, it is.
I don't know how to get it to show up in the right way.
What do you mean? Oh, like a link?
Is it showing up mirrored for you? It's showing up as a mirror image for me.
No, it's showing up
Okay,
there.
good.
Yeah,
Okay, good.
no, yeah, no one's gonna see Kasa Tuj or Sudge.
Good.
No one's gonna see.
Just ask. That
Yes,
is the
just that.
new motto.
Make it happen. So yeah, I'll try to find that article so you can read about it. It was just fascinating. That's something I would have never even thought of that apparently
I would love to see that.
a lot of people and people weren't talking about it, and now now they know. And so it's like, how do you get the word out there? So maybe now people listening will go,
Right.
yeah, I thought my friend was a real jerk. They just had to go, you know, they just had to leave the conversation and they came back.
Wow. You learn something new every day.
That's what I'm here for. If you call me, I'll have like an AI that talks every day that teaches you something new.
Awesome.
I'm a plethora of knowledge of random stuff. So yeah. Yep. Well, I know we're definitely way over time, but it's been a blast. Again, I'll put the all the information where people can get a hold of you and uh, reach out. I strongly recommend that they reach out to you. And then folks who have whether you're a startup or whether you're a large corporation, I think having you come and you what's beautiful is you personally tailor it to them, right? I mean, you gave one example. I know people might get stuck. I want the witch package, but it's not right. Like you are actually listening to what are their problems, what is it they're
Yeah.
going through, how does the communication work today, and then you're figuring out. And again, that's where strategy comes in with the innovation strategist, which is you're applying the right methodology and the right format to these groups so that they can get the best learning ability to match their culture and their communication styles. So I think it's really important. So I thank you very much for taking the time, come on the show and talk. And I'm really excited to have people learn all of this.
Thank you so much for having me, Ben. This has been so much fun, and I learned something too. So thank you.
Awesome. All right. So, you guys, you heard it here. Innovation and strategy, probably one of the most important things you should have, because as we know, communication breakdown and creativity can be a scarce resource or ability within your organizations. Even if you're just a small or a large, it's really important that you sit back, look at Melissa's websites, her posts, reach out to her. It's something that you're not going to regret doing. And you're going to find that you're going to almost have overnight success because of all the work that you're doing. You can see that in the corporate examples we talked about here and just how Melissa thinks. So again, all that stuff will be in the comments. Keep thinking about it. And when all is said and done, just get out there and keep innovating. Thanks.